All right, we are live. It's going to be a lot to talk about once again today. It's basically going to be the update of all the same stuff we were talking about yesterday, the Mosquito fire, the Fairview fire, that ongoing heat wave in California, and then Hurricane K, which is actually now called Post-Tropical Cyclone K, I believe. And we're just going to mostly talk about how all of those things are interacting with each other. And then usually I like to do my wildfire forecast videos as one being 10-minute and then a concise version where I post another one that's 2 minutes. But there's so much going on throughout the day today that there's a lot to research. So I figured I'd just go live while I'm actually researching all of this stuff. So throughout this video, we're just going to kind of be figuring out what's going on around California together. And this is always my favorite place to start, which is the satellite imagery, because it tells a lot of the story of what's going on right now. It looks like a lot of that moisture has moved in from what was Hurricane K, but again is now post-tropical cyclone K. We got some flash flood warnings down in Southern California. Some locations actually picked up as much rain yesterday as you would normally expect those places to get in an entire year with all of that moisture that moved in. Looks like we have some significant thunderstorms popping up over parts of Nevada and Arizona right now. But then just more of that rainfall expected for SoCal today. What I'm hoping is that we get a similar response to all this moisture on the Mosquito fire that we had on the Fairview fire yesterday. We ended up picking up a little rain. We got overall just moisture back into our fuels, and that significantly calmed down fire behavior. So we're hoping this moisture can go up to the Mosquito fire as well. Now overall, the Mosquito fire is still my main concern, so we'll just focus on that one first just to get an idea of where we are with the Mosquito fire. Use our little measuring tool, see if it's moved at all since yesterday. Yeah, still about 28 to 30 miles away or west of Lake Tahoe. Now, one thing that ended up happening yesterday, it was fairly interesting. Sometimes you see this on wildfires where 2 days ago so much smoke was produced that it actually diminished our wildfire activity yesterday. So I believe I posted a video to my Twitter 2 days ago. Yeah, there it is. So that's what the fire looked like 2 days ago. It was one of the biggest smoke plumes that we've seen this entire year, if not the biggest. And overnight, the winds calmed down, and then that just allowed a lot of that smoke to settle down into the surface. We can actually go localized here, zoom in a little closer on the Mosquito fire, that when it goes back to night vision, you can see it shown in that black color right there. And then if we want to look at natural color fire, you can actually see where some of those hot spots are. Looks like it's mostly on the eastern edge of that fire where we're still picking up some of that heat. But basically, so much smoke settled over the fire yesterday that it diminished how hot we got, which diminished how dry we got, which just diminished fire activity in general. So that was some overall pretty good news when it comes to the Mosquito fire update. Now, with that being said, just looking at this map right here, I want to make sure it's the most recent one. Yeah, it looks most recent right there. Where you see that red color, that's where it's picking up some of the more recent heat, some of that same kind of heat that we were seeing on the satellite imagery. And then if we want to see what kind of cities are around here, just to get our bearings. So I'm going to get a drink of water. So I just finished my forecast at KSBW this morning. I've pretty much been talking for about 2 hours and 15 minutes already today. I wasn't talking the entire news show, but plenty of forecasts already. But all right, diving into Mosquito fire right here, we've got Forestville on the west, Volcanoville, and then down here it looks like Quintet, hopefully saying that right, and then Michigan Bluff up towards the north. Our main concern yesterday, I'd say, was Forest Hill, where you can see how close this fire got to the community. We saw one report yesterday that the fire was 0.39 miles away from, I forget what road it was. I posted it. It was 0.39 miles away from the end of Church Street in Forest Hill. But overall, from the information I've been hearing out of Forest Hill, they've done a pretty amazing job on this one. So I'm very happy to report on that news, at least as of the most recent information I have. And we can actually zoom, or one thing that we can do before we zoom into Forest Hill is turn off our most recent wildfire data. One thing that I will point out is if we're just looking at the data that we had yesterday, the bottom of that, there was no data available, so we're not exactly sure how far south that reached yesterday. But then if we click on today, we can start to see where some of that growth was. Looks like we did get some growth around Forest Hill. I believe some of that was actually firing operations. That's basically putting fire on the ground on purpose to clear out some of the vegetation when you have more favorable conditions. But not surprisingly, most of the growth was towards the east and the south. So it kind of went along with those winds that we were talking about yesterday that would lead to some of the growth in those areas. And I'd say the southern edge is probably the area where I'm still expecting the most growth throughout the day today, just because we have, if we zoom in there, we're going to be getting some of these canyon winds in the afternoons. That leads to some growth, and then there's just also a lot of fuels around here. And when we look at our other map, which is right here, and look at fire history, not a whole lot of fire history directly around the Mosquito fire. It looks like we had something from 2016 right there. It was either the volcano or the bottle fire. Kind of hard to tell which one's the 2016 right there. Trailhead fire. Had to just zoom in a little bit more. That one is maybe closer towards Volcanoville, but for Forest Hill, we don't see any recent fire history right there, which means there'd be more fuels around that spot. And then if we zoom out here, we have 2020 Point Fire, 2014 King Fire. That hopefully cleared out a lot of the fuels here. I did see one fire severity map earlier today on Zeke Lunder's page, and it looked like we had some very high burn severity in here, which would have just cleared out a lot of these fuels. So that will definitely help if the fire does push all the way in here, and it looks like it's already starting to almost touch right there. So it'll be interesting to see how much the fire is able to continue into this burn scar. A lot of times though, when we see a fire bump into a previous fire, and especially if it's within the last 5 years, a lot of times it'll just stop it right in its tracks because it lacks the fuel that it needs to keep going. But overall, I would say not a whole lot of fire history around this, so there's still plenty of fuel there. Now, but I think the big factor that's going to play into how active this fire is today is what's going on with the weather forecast. So we're going to take a really good look at that in 1 second. First, though, I just want to show where a lot of the structures are, which makes sense for why we're so concerned about this one. There are thousands of structures, especially to the west of this fire. I would say the spot on the fire that I'm the most concerned about right now is probably this section right here. That's where we have a decent amount of hot spots still showing up, and that's where there's the largest amount of structures closest to the largest amount of hot spots. Now around Forest Hill, looks like the fire has, I don't want to say calmed down in that area, but all the reports that I've been hearing out of Forest Hill seems like some good news. So I think I'm actually shifting the majority of my focus down to this kind of southwesterly edge down there towards Volcanoville. Or no, that's not towards Volcano. This would be more, let's see if we have a name for a town in here. Looks like Tunnel Hill Loop, Spirit Creek, some of these spots down here. Now, one other thing that we can do, probably should have done this first, was look at the numbers and the evacuation notices on the Mosquito fire. It's up to 33,754 acres and 0% containment. Interested to see how that compares with, I didn't post the acres that we were at yesterday. 2 days ago, we were at 13,000 acres on September 8th. But then most of the growth that we've had since then was, or 3 days ago we were at that. Most of the growth that we had was when it was blowing up and we had that huge smoke plume right there. Not nearly as much growth on the fire yesterday. Now, with that being said, we do still have a lot of evacuation orders and warnings in place. a way to find a map for those. If you don't like the Word version that you can find on Watch Duty, which I put the link for that in the description of this video, you can go to Inciweb. And then if you go to Incident Overview, they have evacuation maps right here. An example of what that looks like, you got your fire perimeter shown in purple, and then that red color is where you have mandatory evacuations. Yellow color is where you have those evacuation warnings. Now, I do actually just want to stay on this Inciweb page for a second because it looks like personnel is up to 1,565. Looks like they might need to update the acres right there. Fuel's involved. That's something we've talked a lot about with vegetation is timber, brush, hardwood litter, critically dry, especially after this last week where we had all those triple-digit days. And then any beneficial effects of relative humidity increase will be slight and brief. That's not exactly good to see. Vegetation will remain primed for extreme fire behavior. So everything that we were hoping with post-tropical cyclone K looks like right there, they're saying they're not actually expecting all that much effect on the fuels, which means they're not exactly expecting much rain or anything like that. But we'll look at those rain forecast models in a second. Significant events. Observed fire behavior was moderate yesterday, consisting of uphill runs, torching, and flanking. On Friday, fire behavior was moderated by late dissipation of smoke inversion layer. So that's what I was talking about earlier, where we had so much smoke produced 2 days ago that yesterday it looked a lot like that, where the smoke just settled down over the fire. Now, with that being said, it looks like we're starting to see a little bit more smoke picking up right now than what I was seeing at any time yesterday. So we can check our live shot right here. So this will be time lapse of the last 3 hours. And you notice all of that haze early in the morning. Does look like some of that smoke is starting to pick up though, so could be primed for another big afternoon, although I can't really make that call until we look at the weather forecast, because that's, I think, going to be the biggest factor that comes into play today, is whether that inversion lifts and then we end up getting back to hot, dry conditions, and then the potential for any thunderstorms or rainfall that we'll have to see if that will be playing any type of role. Now, where did I want to go next? Wanted to stay right here, weather concerns. This is basically the summary of what we're about to talk about. On Saturday, critically hot, dry conditions will moderate slightly with the moisture effects from Hurricane K. Relative humidity will be slightly higher and temperatures slightly cooler into the 90s. No major wind events are anticipated, so that's great news. And diurnal wind patterns will preside. Considerable fire growth and smoke plume development are possible. Winds aloft will shift east to southwest to west to southeast with the passage of the remnants of Hurricane K. And then just our projected incident activity. Fire has been burning actively overnight. Higher relative humidity Saturday may provide a slight and temporary decrease in fire behavior, but expect very active fire growth overnight. So with all that being said, interested to just see what the observations on the ground are right now. So let's zoom into Forest Hill. These are actual weather stations, so these aren't forecast models or anything like that. This is actually just picking up what's going on the ground. Click into Forest Hill right here. Looks like, we'll go the full outlook to see what's going on. So, looks like our relative humidity is around 43%, so that's pretty good for right now. And then temperature, we're already up to 81 degrees. So yeah, that's already pretty warm day, and we have a lot of heating still to come. Interested to just see how warm we're going to get. I want to make sure that let's put it right. Yeah, let's move it over here. I think that's more like in the general direction of where we're concerned about some of the big fire activity today. So looks like already showing dry conditions there. Then as we get into this afternoon, does look like there's at least a little more moisture than the past couple days, where 2 days ago, we were down in the low teens. Our forecast model for yesterday was in the single digits. Of course, we didn't get that dry because of that all the smoke that protected us from that heating in the afternoon. But it is forecasted to be dry once again this afternoon. Temperature-wise, let's see what we're going to get up to. 89 degrees, so not all that much warmer than where we are right now, but that'll depend on exactly where you are on the fire. And one other report that we were looking at this morning said they're expecting some low 90s. Again, that's an improvement when compared to the triple digits that we were in this entire last week. But my research at San Jose State has shown that there's a threshold of about 75 to 76 degrees, where once you're past that, you have the potential for one of those extreme fire days. And then, interesting, the relative humidity threshold that I found was 17%. So it looks like we'll be right on that. So there is, when it just comes to those two variables, it looks like we're right in that area where we could be getting some of that extreme growth, which in my master's thesis I defined as more than 10,000 acres burned in one day. But there's also a lot of other factors that are involved, the most important one being fuel moisture, and the fuels are still critically dry. Now, interested to see what will happen with wind gusts today. Looks like they're expecting this afternoon, when you'll have your strongest winds, to be blowing in that same direction, kind of that easterly flow, which makes sense for when we look at where the fire is the most active. It's been on that easterly side right there, and then where we get those canyon winds, that's where we've been seeing some of that activity on the southern side as well. So overall, I'd say the information we've collected so far, I'd say good news for Forest Hill as of right now. But then I think I'm going to be watching the southern edge very closely, and then expecting the most growth on that eastern side. But the thing is, there we don't have nearly as many structures as what we have on that southwestern side. So that's why this will be the area that I'm kind of the most concerned about right now. So now, let's answer the question that we're all kind of wondering: thunderstorm activity. So let's just go to about 9 a.m. here. Nothing yet. That's kind of expected because usually thunderstorms pick up in the afternoon. By 2 p.m., we are showing some thunderstorms picking up in the Sierra. The question will be is if it can get down to where we have this fire. Then when it comes to thunderstorms, it's a bit of a wild card when it comes to thunderstorms and wildfire. There's two sides of the coin. There's good and bad news. The good side of things is it could bring some rainfall. I believe we saw that on the McKinney fire or the Fairview fire that we're going to look at in a second, where it drops some rainfall and brings a lot of moisture back into the fuels and really helps diminish wildfire activity. Where the bad news could come in is if a fire or a thunderstorm is near the fire but not directly over it, so you don't get any rainfall, and then you get the outflow winds, and then that can lead to some rapid fire growth because the winds coming out of a thunderstorm are fairly strong. And then the other aspect that most people in California are accustomed to, especially after 2020, is with thunderstorms you can get lightning, and then lightning can start new fires. So I'll be keeping a close eye on the Sierra and Southern California throughout the day today, because it does look like we are expecting some of that thunderstorm activity. Now, one thing we actually could do wasn't zooming in right here. Yeah, the rain forecast really isn't looking too good. So I wouldn't exactly count on that for the mosquito fire. Let's just go, we'll go this first. Check out any rain. Looks like our best shot was what we were just looking at around like 2 p.m. But even if it comes in, that looks like very light rain. It's only the remnants of Tropical Storm K, or hurricane, what used to be Hurricane K. So even if we get rain, I don't think it's going to be significant enough to really help us out with our fuels. I think a lot of our conditions are looking primed for some activity this afternoon. Now, one other thing that we can look at is total precip expected throughout the day today. Yeah, so mosquito fire is going to be right about there, not showing any significant rain building into that area. So that's unfortunate to see right there, but we'll at least have some increase in moisture and cloud cover, which will help us out, and temperatures are cooler than this last week. So overall, I'm not expecting it to be as active as 2 days ago. I would say it's going to be a big question mark if it's more active than yesterday, because right now we still have a lot of that smoke hanging around, although it does look like it's starting to pick up. And then if it starts to pick up, it can be one of those positive feedback loops where the fire starts creating its own winds. Those winds could clear out some of the smoke, and then we pick up more heating, and then the fire just starts taking off. So definitely going to be keeping a close eye on the mosquito fire this afternoon. Now, when you look at all that smoke, you might be thinking about air quality, so we can look at that. Zooming in around the mosquito fire, yeah, we do have that portion that has that very unhealthy to even hazardous air, and then a very large portion, including Lake Tahoe, that has that unhealthy air. Moderate air quality spreading all the way to places like the Bay Area, the Central Coast, and then Southern California, much improved in large part because of Hurricane K. Brought in some winds, really mixed things up, brought a lot of rainfall as well. So I think we can actually transition down to Southern California at this point. Yeah, and just the overall summary on mosquito fire, 33,000 acres, 0% containment. Moderate behavior yesterday because of the smoke inversion. But this afternoon we are going to be warm, dry, not as dry or not as warm as previous days. So that's some good news right there. And then we'll even cross our fingers for some thunderstorm activity, but not really counting on it. I'd say rainfall doesn't look as good as I was hoping to see earlier in the day. It actually looks quite minimal, much more for Southern California. But overall, for the mosquito fire, we are going to keep a close eye on that, especially that section where you see all of those structures right there and some of that heat activity. Actually, one final thing we could do, disclaimer on this, a lot of times I don't even show this in my videos because it can be very misleading, but sometimes it is useful just to see how much relative heat we're picking up on the fire and where that heat is. Looks like most of the heat being picked up is on that northern side, which goes along with what we're seeing with this smoke coming off. Looks like it's on that northern side of the fire where we are seeing some of that smoke right there. So keeping an eye on that. And then you notice the direction that smoke is going. Looks like we have very southerly winds right now. So for at least the next hour or two, most of our growth should be towards the north before the winds shift to a more easterly direction later in the day. And then that'll try to push the fire towards the east. And then we start getting those canyon winds. And that we'll have to keep an eye on this southern edge to see if that starts to flare up as well. So let's go and check out the Fairview fire at this point. We'll maybe start on watch duty just to get our numbers for it. And that page is frozen. Let's see if we can go like that. All right, there we go. And it took us right to the Fairview fire. It's almost like it knew what we wanted. So this should be a relatively quick update because we have mostly good news down here. 28,307 acres, 40% containment. And we do still have some evacuation orders and warnings in place. So you can check the links in the description for that kind of information. Now I want to see if we're even picking up any heat on the Fairview fire. Whoa, zoomed way out there. Because this is where we had the best effects from Hurricane K yesterday as it moved in. Let's go down to Southern California. Oh, that's actually a nice shot right there. When I click out, you can see that wide shot where you can really see where Hurricane K moved up Baja California, and then now it's taking a left turn into the Pacific. It's going to be diminishing. But yesterday, this was where there was kind of a big question mark about what was going to happen to the Fairview fire, because as Hurricane K was moving in, we saw some forecasts for 65 to 70 mile per hour winds that had the potential to pick up burning embers, start fires as much as a mile away, with an 85% chance of those embers starting new fires because of how dry the fuels were. But then we ended up just picking it. But then the other side of that was the rainfall that was going to be coming in, some of the flood watches in place. And you can see how much activity we still have down there in the form of clouds. And that was what ended up being the biggest impacts on the Fairview fire. We picked up some great moisture into our fuels, and that really calmed down activity. Now, one thing that I didn't pull this up, so I'm going to pull it up right now. Let's check out the radar to see if we're actually getting any rain down there right now. Hey, it looks like some rain on the central coast. Glad I included that in my forecast this morning. Then if we come down here, looks like we're getting some heavier rain right over Palm Desert right now. But then down here, just some scattered showers overall throughout Southern California. And then something else that we didn't look at yet. I don't really want to take away that models page because we're going to look at that in just another second. So let's go to the hazards. This is something that I probably should have shown at the start of the video, but we're showing it now. So a few things going on here. I'd say the first thing I noticed is the Central Valley finally out of that excessive heat warning that we were in for this entire last week. So that's the update to the heat part of this video. The heat wave has officially ended for California. Yesterday, the forecast for Sacramento and Fresno were still around 105 degrees. Today, around 90 degrees, and in some cases, even cooler than that. The example, when I was doing the forecast for the Central Coast this morning on KSBW, yesterday's forecast highs or the highs we picked up yesterday were around 104, 105 degrees for Morgan Hill and Gilroy. Today, just expecting low to mid 80s, so about 20 degrees cooler. So heat wave officially ended, excessive heat warnings officially gone. Now we're kind of changing our gaze when it comes to those warnings to the flood watches throughout much of Southern California and the Sierra. Looks like less of a threat today than what we had yesterday, though. Yesterday was when Hurricane K was moving in. We had the largest amount of moisture, and we did end up getting some flash flood warnings popping up in Southern California. Now, just back to the Fairview fire, though. Let's zoom in here and see. Yeah, so this could be a little misleading because the clouds might be so thick over the fire that we're not able to pick up any heat activity, and that actually does look to be what's going on here right now. So I can't exactly say, oh, we look at this fire, there's no more red dots, that means the fire's out. Can't say that because if you look at how many clouds are over the fire, it'd be surprising if the satellites could break through that to actually see any heat activity on the ground. But overall, I would say it's safe to say things are looking fairly good on the Fairview fire. We picked up all that moisture yesterday, and yeah, not seeing any heat right there. Let's see GOES detections. Yeah, that's not showing any heat either. One thing that we can do is check out, let's see if Watch Duty is saying anything right here. There's had a briefing, 40% contained. I was looking for, so I saw it on Twitter earlier. Let's see if I could find it again. It's basically that same kind of summary that we looked at yesterday, that which pretty much summed up the fire in 3 sentences. So it'd be fun. Oh, we got it. So this is exactly what I wanted to find. Fire activity has been greatly reduced due to the moisture from Tropical Storm K. So if you are confused about why I keep changing what I'm calling K, the name of it changes as it diminishes in winds. So it was Hurricane K. Then once it gets below 70, I believe it's 74 miles per hour, then it turns into a tropical storm, and then tropical depression, I believe, and then it basically just disappears into the Pacific. But deep-seated heat is still present in the dense old-growth brush fields and stump holes. Fine flashy fuels will not sustain fire or ignition. So the reason that fine fuels won't sustain fire or ignition is because those fine fuels are able to be affected by moisture faster than, like if you were comparing that with a big branch. If a bunch of clouds move in, bunch high relative humidity, the branch is so thick that it's not really going to have that much effect. But those very fine fuels with a large amount of surface area can pick up a lot of that moisture very quickly. So then not expecting any action there today, which is some great news, although we do still have 8,764 structures threatened. We're up to 13 structures destroyed. I believe that's 2 up from yesterday. I wouldn't imagine that's because 2 more structures burned yesterday. I'd more imagine that's because they were able to get some maybe damage assessment crews out there. But again, that's just kind of guesstimating what's going on there. Structures damaged 4. And then remember, we do unfortunately have 2 fatalities on this fire. So as always, thoughts and prayers go out to everybody who has been affected by not only the Fairview fire, but all the wildfires throughout California over the last few years. Now, I don't think there's much else we really need to say about the Fairview fire. One thing that we can do is just see how much more rain we're expected to get throughout the day today. Let's click through here. Yeah, pretty minimal. Most of that rain was picked up yesterday. Now it's just some scattered showers that we were just looking at on the radar. That'll be bringing maybe 0.5 to 1.5 inches, probably a little more where you see that moderate rainfall right there. So that's pretty much everything that's going on with the Mosquito, the Fairview fire. We talked about the heat wave a little bit. To put that heat wave in better perspective, we can check out what's going on with the temperature anomalies. This is what we looked like yesterday when that heat wave was still in effect. We're 20 to even 30 degrees above average. And then right here, that blue color, that's the effects of Hurricane K starting to come into Southern California. Significantly cools us off. And then this is what we look like this afternoon. Central Valley still a little bit above average. Southern California well below average. But majority of California about where you would expect this time of the year, and most importantly around the Mosquito fire, back to more normal conditions. And that's still the area of California I'd say I'm the most concerned about. So that's the area that I'm still going to be keeping the closest eye on. So if you want to keep a close eye on it as well, you can subscribe to this channel. There's a chance I'll be doing an update and forecast on just the Mosquito fire later, especially this afternoon if it starts to pick up in activity. I'll probably do a 10-minute video and then a 2-minute concise video, just depending on how much time you have to watch wildfire forecasting content. So if you want to stay tuned for those, you can subscribe to this channel. And I'm also on Twitter where I do kind of just briefer posts as well. So hopefully this was helpful, and I hope you all have a great weekend. Enjoy that cooler weather and some of those clouds that have come in. So again, thanks for watching, and hope you have a good one.